Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Fireside Creators. I am your host, Reverend Dr. Sherry Pallas, and this week we are talking about Satanic Panic. It's going to be an info-filled show, as also probably quite gripping. If you are watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe. If you are watching on Facebook, remember to register with StreamYard so when you comment or question, I can see your name. If you enjoy the show and would like to support me, you can go to Fireside Creators at Patreon or Sherry Pallas at Cafe Press or sherrypallas.com. There's multiple ways to support me. You can also support me by sharing the show or inviting your friends to watch with you. I appreciate it all. And I appreciate you just being here because it enables an audience, so I'm just not sitting here alone. I want to thank our sponsors that enable the show. Ruth, Amanda, Michelle, Kirsten, and Tim, thank you so much. And Heidi, you all rock. You guys support me unconditionally, and it's absolutely fabulous. Thank you for that. So let's get to the show. Our first guest is Kirsten. Oh, no, it's Tim. Tim Hammett earned his divinity degree and served in the Presbyterian ministry for over 20 years. He retired in 2001. In 2019, he retired from the Iowa National Guard, working for the Department of Public Defense. In the early 70s, Tim was drawn to groups who were critical of civil and ecclesiastical systems. However, he saw the same power dynamics across them all, leaving him to embody the Who's lyrics, "We don't get fooled again." Now at 67, he's returned to his first love, music playing drums, professionally since the age of 11. In fact, that's why he's usually not here on Tuesday nights anymore, is because he's playing drums, but I got to excuse him for that. Welcome, Tim. How are you?
I'm well, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks so much for being here. And next, we have Kirsten. Kirsten Feisal is a neo-pagan, a professional in the anti-violence against women movement, and an anthropologist at heart. Welcome, Kirsten. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you both for being on the show. And I think it's so cool that I have you guys here. I see a Facebook user saying hello to me. Hi. Don't know who you are, but hello. Thanks for joining. And I just want to announce, first of all, that Kirsten and Tim are a couple, and they're just one of my favorite couples out there. So let me just get that out there right now. But I also want to start with a mistake that I made. In describing this show and posting it and everything, I said in the last 30 years or since the 80s that this has been going on. And then doing research, I was flushed with an epiphany of it going back hundreds of years. Primarily, we see it in our generations in the 70s and stuff like that, but we can go back to the Salem witch trials for it going on. So starting the show off, I want to say, sorry that I messed up in my description because that was wrong to begin with. This panic, this scapegoating, this boogeyman in our neighborhood has been going on for quite some time. Tim, what do you start us off tonight? What do you have to say about this, and how can we stop this madness?
Well, I'm not sure we're ever going to be able to actually stop it because it keeps reoccurring in each generation as if it just showed up in that generation. You made a very important point, and that was the Salem witch trials. And if anyone has really studied those, especially from an ecclesiastical point of view, eventually it was condemned by ecclesiastical authorities as being utter nonsense. But that's not what we hear. And certainly the scarring was left. And, the bottom of the barrel was never cleaned out and never really dealt with. So it keeps reoccurring. And I will say that, as an overarching theme of this, I do believe that it's a red herring to be preoccupied with something that is basically not in existence, to take the spotlight off of personal and collective hypocrisy. And that's been my take, and it's been my take when I was in the pastorate for well over 20 years, and it's still my view some 20 years later after that. So,
From doing the research, I couldn't help but to think it was very opportunistic. It
mhm,
really suited agendas. Nothing is more motivating than fear. The church realized this 1,000 years ago.
yes,
And the way to be completely divisive is to bring Satan into the picture. To
correct.
add even more to that, let's add child sacrifice and sex trafficking, and you don't get a bigger boogeyman. You really don't. I
Right.
mean, those are like the top three across the board. Everybody, but most all the Abrahamic religions all have the same Satan pretty much, except well, Judaism. But it's you don't get a bigger boogeyman than this, and it's so manipulative. I mean, it's ruined people's lives.
Mhm. And
Kirsten,
continues
what
to
do
do
you have to
so.
say?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tim.
No, I'm just saying it continues to do so.
Yeah, especially with QAnon now.
Yeah.
Kirsten, give us some wisdom.
Um, okay. Well, I don't think it will ever go away because I think it is part of the human condition, and that was one of the reasons I in this time around I wanted to highlight anthropology in my bio because I really do think that you have to take both a historical and an anthropological look at it and see it in context and see the way um, within the social sciences they're called moral panics, and Western cultures are not the only, like, moral panics exist in all cultures.
Mhm.
And they serve a particular function, and that function is really to um, reaffirm the boundaries and the status quo. And so if you think about, I mean, we can talk way historical context. We can talk the early Christians presenting a threat to Roman status quo, and
Wow.
Mhm.
and uh, the things that were said was, okay, they sacrifice children, they drink blood, they so you have this exact same blood libel myth in that
It goes all
situation.
the way back to the Old Testament with the Canaanites.
Oh, it goes, yeah. It is one of the things that humans do
Mhm.
to
Wow.
reestablish the social order.
Interesting. But is it productive? It
Right.
seems like it
It
would
is
be.
it is productive in maintaining social order. So if we so
Right.
let's come back to, if you want to come back to this century, I mean, this century, um, and look at just the Satanic Panic piece.
Okay.
In the 1960s and 1970s, you had um, all of these social changes. You had the women's movement, you had the civil rights movement, you had the gay rights movement, you had changes in sexual mores, you had women entering the workplace, changing gender roles. And if you look at and one other thing I want to say about these kinds of moral panics is they are very often, um, and I think this is definitely true of Satanic Panic and QAnon. They're often amongst those kind of middle class folks. It
Right.
is it is the white middle class folks in the Satanic Panic that had the biggest response. You didn't hear this in communities of color. This stuff was not happening in communities of color. It was not happening amongst impoverished people. It was happening amongst people who could afford therapists and daycare and all of these other things, right?
Interesting. Okay.
But you
And that's
have
seen
all
in
of this,
QAnon today.
and that's absolutely true in QAnon today. So you had all these challenges to the quote normal social order. Um, and when you look at so children and children shouldn't be in childcare. Women should be back in the home watching the children. When you look at what the Satanic Panic attacked, it attacked this concept of children in daycare.
Mhm.
If you look through all of the seminars, and I went to plenty of them. They talk about how you can spot teens who are having gender identity issues, and that's a red flag that they're satanic. Um, they 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 kind of have this plausible deniability of not making it racial because it's about Satanism, but they always bring in voodoo and Santeria and
Wow.
all of this hidden racism. So it's all wrapped up in this picture, and there's a blooming of other religions in the United States. The neo-pagan movement really got foothold in the 60s and blossomed throughout the 70s. So it was really like by the 80s, we were ready for this kind of no, we've gone too far. We must reestablish the boundaries around sexuality, around gender identity, around all of these things, and it blossomed through this Satanic Panic. Today, it's blossoming through QAnon, right? And again, it's looking at the same things. There's this hyperfixation on trans folks. That's part of it. There's it used to be Satanists eating babies in cemeteries, and now it's Democrats.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but but at this point in my life, I kind of have to. It's kind of like the rapture is coming tomorrow. I've got my punch card for how many times it's going to happen.
And I think you need to add the millenism, the millennialism, whatever, into that
millenarianism.
Into that picture of what was happening.
The apocalyptic type thing.
Yes.
Coming to the end of the world, and this is what happens.
But anyway, we had pedophile, baby-eating Satanists in the graveyard in the 80s, and now we have pedophile, baby-eating Democrats in pizzerias.
Yeah, with basements that have no basements.
Yes, yes, and also this again when we tie back to the whole issue of children and that being so important. One of the things that was happening in a social policy place in the 70s is kind of this discovery of the issue of child abuse. And then that's when you had the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act passed in the 1970s. And at that point in time, people in the child welfare field knew that one of the top, if not the number one risk factor for child abuse was poverty.
Yeah.
And even today, 75% of cases that Department of Human Services, Child Protective Services works with are poverty related. 75% of cases referred are about poverty. If we could solve poverty, children would be safer.
Well, one would argue that poverty is satanic more than anything else that they're claiming is satanic, right?
Yes, but instead it's the inverse. It's this idea of social welfare systems being satanic. Like if you wanted to help children, you would put social welfare systems in place.
Yeah.
And what was happening during the Reagan era? Well, we can't have this be true, that we need to have this social welfare programming. So instead, we're going to take it out of the family unit. It's not about poverty. It's about individuals who are evil, right? And we can get rid of all of that social safety net during the Reagan era. Again, 80s, Satanic Panic. It really inverted everything that we actually know about child welfare.
Wow.
To go with this conservative social agenda, which is getting rid of the social safety net, maintaining the heteronormative gender roles. And so I know that it has a lot of media.
The media totally perpetuates this.
Exciting stuff going on. But underneath that, there was a lot of damage in terms of public policy, in terms of the counseling and therapeutic fields, in terms of criminal legal system. There are people in prison today for ritual abuse still.
I saw that when I was doing the research. Initially there was like 26 people that were arrested. Most of them, there was hundreds that they looked at, and over the years, in fact, it said it was California's longest trial at 5 years. And by the time they were done with it, most of it had debunked itself. It was, it wasn't
Correct.
even there. But people are serving. There was somebody who was just released after 20 years on a 40-year sentence, all because of this panic. When I was growing up, my mom and the school that I went to went through their whole book burning and record burning phases. And I remember going out to the garage and seeing a pile of cassette tapes. If you're under 40, go ahead and Google that. But a pile of cassette tapes. And it was like, one of them was REO Speedwagon. And again, if you're under 40, go ahead and Google them. But it was, REO Speedwagon is about as mayonnaise as anything can get. And my mom swore that REO was a satanic message. She thought the beetle in the Journey logo was a satanic message. Of course, AC/DC was. Anti-Christian devil child, I think is what it was. But I also remember there being a phase where this woman, my mother, who loved her music, she actually created her own Beatles band, was convinced that music was the source of Satan, because Satan was supposedly the director of music in heaven. And when he was exiled, it was for him to come through, and that's how he was going to change the entire world, was through bands like REO Speedwagon.
Could I speak to some of that a little bit in regards to how this goes into pop culture, because this is quite interesting. In the 70s, the Jesus movement obviously started getting some traction, and somewhat at the spearhead of that was music. And I was in one of the in the Southeast, one of a very popular band. They call them contemporary Christian music today. We would never have dreamed of calling it. We were a street band. We were always out on the street. But we wound up at festivals, and they started bringing in Mike Warnke, who was a comedian. Well, Mike Warnke eventually went into writing which became somewhat the Bible for satanic ritual in our culture, and how widespread it was. He came out with a book called The Satan Seller in 1972, and he started using the stage. I saw this firsthand.
It's in my
He would start plugging his book on stage, and I got a copy of it, and I read it, and my first response, this is a bunch of BS. It's BS, but it started taking root very quick.
Oh, yeah.
Hal Lindsey's late great Planet Earth started focusing in on the occult, and it started growing. And I instantly saw that there's a major shift that's taking place here in the 70s, and it concerned me greatly. Well, right on the heels of that, and by the way, Mike Warnke, ironically enough, was completely debunked by a magazine that's called Cornerstone, which was the original Jesus People USA out of Chicago. These people were bona fide street Christians, and they went after this commercialized and liars. I mean, they exposed him coming and going and nailed his hide to the wall. But he is still, to this day, on the speaking circuit.
Is he really?
He is still on the speak. Yes.
He was like a regular at my evangelical church. So when I saw his name in the research, I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot about him.
Yeah.
And if you look at the personal morality of this guy, we should be surprised if we elected a president that has somewhat the same parallel morality. The guy is really scuzzy. I mean, he's scuzzy. And so what happened, if you remember in the 80s now, and I won't talk too long about this, it's not just the conservative right, but Tipper Gore, remember what she did? She wanted to start labeling albums because of
that's right.
sexual violence, but also what? The big O, the occult. And I mean, the big movers and shakers came out and addressed Congress, which was Frank Zappa, let's see. I got my notes here. Let me just D. Snyder from Twisted Sister, and I've got, when you want, I've got the link to his address. He said he was raised as a Christian and still
Mm-hmm.
holds to those principles, and he nailed Congress to the wall. And you could see Tipper Gore in the background turning pale, because what he said was, you have taken everything we've done, you've misinterpreted, we put our lyrics on the album sleeves, everything, and I'll go through what we said. You guys are doing nothing but a witch trial here. And he was extremely articulate. The guy's
Oh yeah.
over the top intelligent. Uh, John Denver. I mean, you want to go from Twisted Sister to John Denver, same thing. But the damage had already been done, and this has been my continued gripe, and that is that the Christian church that has supported all of this, especially evangelicals, have never come back and said, we're wrong. We need to make this right. We have created a forum for these people. We have damaged lives. Total silence. And that's why it keeps happening again in one generation after the other.
Well, I think it also has to do with the fact that it's a lot easier to deal with a boogeyman than it is yourself. It's a
Right.
lot easier to blame someone else than be accountable for your own
Correct.
actions.
Exactly.
It's a lot easier to say the devil made me do it as opposed that I'm just an asshole.
Yeah.
So, it's that Satan is very opportunistic and totally fits into agendas, whenever he's convenient to use.
Right. And when I was in
Kirsten?
the, well, go
I'm
ahead. Go
sorry.
ahead. Well, let me
Oh,
just add,
I was just thinking that
let me just say, go ahead, please,
please.
hon. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
Tim?
Well, let me just
Finish,
say
go.
that when I was in the pastorate, because I never conducted myself to go after these, what was the supposed uh, 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 venues of Satanism, but people in the congregation were being influenced by their other friends, uh, by talk, books, and things. I mean, we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons,
Oh, yeah.
Teletubbies, Harry Potter, constant.
Smurfs.
Uh, Illuminati was an obsession. Harry Potter, and even when MTV was coming in on cable, they had a huge rally at a mega church here, and and you could sign up to speak. And when I signed up to speak, they did not get what they were expecting. And I basically said, this is not your problem. The problem is the people here are gathered. And a woman stood up and tried to cast the devil out of me. I mean, we're talking about a crowd of 600 or 700 people. Because I told him, I said, look, I said, when the Apostle Paul stood at the Areopagus, he did not go after what you're going after. I said, as a matter of fact, he was talking to a very pagan audience. And because I asked the audience, how many of you think that God needs your help? And they all raised their hand. And see, there's the problem. And Paul's address to the Athenians said, God doesn't need your help. And that's when she stood up, started rebuking me, the devil, and trying to cast devils out of me, because I said, God doesn't need your help. Quit trying to defend him by going after MTV. The problem is in the families. You need to interact with your children regarding music and need to be on the forefront. You don't have a clue of what's out there. And why is that? Because they think that all music is from the devil. So why would they study it? With my boys, I started exposing them to Jean-Luc Ponty and the Marhu Vishnu Orchestra by the time they were 11 years old. And so, because somebody wanted to know, how do you keep them out of rap? I said, I'm not going to keep them out of rap, but I will expose them to very rich pop music. And that did the trick.
Roman, who made this comment, he and I went to school together. So it was, into the book burnings and record burnings and all
Right.
of that in that Christian San Jose, California area with all of the demonic things that were going on. In fact, he remembers me as being a Journey fan. And Michelle, it's the reaction of people who have grown up in an unempowered environment, have to have Satan or the devil to
Yes.
blame things on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Kirsten, you were going to say?
I don't remember what I was going to say, but I can say all kinds of things.
Sorry.
No. But I guess one of the things is that, so this, you talk about this was happening in school, but that was a Christian school. You were talking about this is what happened in church, but I'm not Christian, and we went to public schools, and like my youngest sister was held after school when she was in 5th grade, and kind of the height of this panic was mid 80s to maybe 92 or 3, and then it kind of it's transformed, but because the teacher had overheard my sister talking to another child and basically saying all of this stuff about these albums is dumb. It's not satanic, it's just music. And the teacher was incredibly concerned that, again, public school teacher, that Jalila was not taking this seriously enough.
Wow, I really thought it only had to do with the church. Really? It was in public school too?
No, that's just what I mean. This was absolutely pervasive in the public sphere. So she was held after school. She was given a list by the teacher of satanic bands, and it included like Earth, Wind, and Fire. I remember Earth, Wind, and Fire the most because I was like, what?
But that's what we did with REO Speedwagon. There was a whole stack of it, but I was like, yeah, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Saturday. That was a satanic song.
And then when Jalila was like, no, and basically was trying to say my family doesn't believe this, whatever, then the teacher basically was implying, well, then maybe your family is satanic, and we need to investigate and rescue you. Okay, so that's one situation. I'm going to set that aside. Now I'm going to talk about another sister who had a very hard cultural transition from living overseas to back into American high schools, and often dressed kind of semi-goth. But what that meant was like black clothes, right? She wore black clothes. Sometimes she covered her hair, in a traditional way. Sometimes she didn't. And she hennaed her hands. And this was before henna became popular, but she hennaed her hands. And for us, the Saudi way of hennaing your hands is to do the whole palm. Just the whole palm is this brownish orange. It isn't the little delicate flowers, anything. And she doodled. And she was, some teacher turned her into the counselor. And then my mother got a call saying, we're so sorry that, to give you this information, but we needed to notify you that your child is satanic, is into Satanism, and we need to have a meeting because your child, and first of all, they didn't know what they were getting because the whole family showed up.
What did your mom say?
Well, first we peeled her off the ceiling.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, she didn't swear so much, so we swore for her. And then we all showed up at the meeting. And it's like, first of all, you can't turn somebody in for being satanic because this would be America.
Right.
Yeah. Are you going to turn her in for being Jewish or Muslim or whatever? Exactly. What are you talking about? But so the doodles that they had confiscated and showed us were things like the woman symbol, or even scarier, right. woman.
Oh, wow.
Because she was kind of starting to come out to herself. And then, so that's, again, I'm talking about these things function to reestablish certain norms. The recycling symbol, the little triangles with the arrows going around.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of really satanic symbols like that.
Wow.
And
talk about fear.
Right. And the hands. And on her hands. It's like, what do you think that they're stained with blood? It's henna. It's a cultural thing.
It's pure ignorance is what it is.
It was pure ignorance. It was pure ethnophobia. It was pure heteronormative Christianity, conservative bullshit.
Yeah.
And it was there in the public school. She was getting great grades. She was not a problem child. She caused no arguments. There was nothing except for this. She looked different. It was this xenophobic reaction. And So again, you have to tie this into this kind of nativist, we have this xenophobic reaction going on now. Brown people are scary. Can't have any of those Mexicans.
It's ignorance. It's fear. It's
Yeah.
ignorance driven by fear and all of these things.
And if you just scraped a little bit below the Satanic Panic, there was all this racism hidden under there. Like you go to the seminars, and so what's scary? It's voodoo. What's scary? It's Santeria. What's scary? I went to one, and he was talking about how one of his proofs was, these Latinos, sometimes they'll drive by the cemetery and they'll throw oranges over the fence. They'll give offerings to the dead. And I'm like, yeah, well, I took a loaf of bread out there yesterday. So what's your point?
I think I need to go to the cemetery for some oranges and bread.
Yeah. Be on the other side and catch it.
Yeah.
Kirsten, speak to also how this found its way into law enforcement training.
Oh God. Well,
because that's where the schools were getting fed a lot of this.
Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of it happened with Columbine too, because all of a sudden, it was the video games with Columbine that drove that massacre. Then it was the music. Then it was their black trench coat, and it was goth. The goth people were all satanic. I mean, all of the fears that come with it. Were also, again, it's the boogeyman. Instead of going, okay, why are these children fucked up? Let's look at this. What is wrong with it? Or looking at your sister, assuming she is, because of this fear. It's so damaging, and it's I don't know if social media or the media is, with QAnon now, but it seems like QAnon is the pinnacle of all of this combined. And like it's almost coming to a head for an explosion that is going to just screw everybody up, because they really believe that guy went to go shoot up the pizza parlor. Yeah. These are people who truly, honestly believe this propaganda and this fear-based control, and that there is this boogeyman out there.
And so did these teachers, and so did these law enforcement officers. Yes, the law enforcement was a big part of this, and there's like a seminar industry that is connected to law enforcement. And I would put the House on Un-American Activities Committee stuff, I would put the Red Scare as a moral panic. I would put it right on the same timeline. So you're looking for criminal activity that's communist, well, looking for criminal activity that's satanic. And so you have people who are police officers, or former police officers, or former pastors, cops, which it was not uncommon that they would have had experience in both of those roles. And they go and they do it. They see a seminar, they see another seminar, they think then they are an expert, and they go out and they reproduce. And often, I had forgotten what a big part of my life this was back then. Like somewhere I have a stack of handouts from these different ones, where often they were using the same, like they were just photocopying the same bullshit material that they'd picked out up at another one, and making a business out of it. And so what would happen, and this certainly happened here in Ames, you'd have somebody come in, they would like almost do an assessment of your community. Like they would go around with the local cops and they go, "Ooh, do you see that graffiti? That's the sign of this." And, "Oh, do you see that? That's," and then that would be in the paper.
A satanic assessment of your community. Just
so you did this, get everybody interested, and then there would be some kind of a public training, speech, you name it, that would bring all the crowds in. They would give seminars to city councils, to educators. They were at conferences, at professional conferences. I had an exchange at the suicidology conference one year in a workshop that was on satanic ritual abuse, basically saying, what you're saying is bullshit. So somewhere in an archive, there's a recording of me calling somebody out in the middle of their workshop. I went to a child abuse, a statewide child abuse conference in Iowa, and there was a workshop that I went to on satanic ritual abuse. And when I said, I got problems with this, I was kind of patted on the head. Oh, I know it's so hard to listen to, and you want to see clearly you're in denial. You're just in denial because this is so hard.
I met my first witch when I was 14. I met my first Jew when I was 27.
Right.
So actually,
that's part of your problem right there.
Yeah, I actually met my first witch before I even met a Jew.
That's funny.
And it was, so the Satanic Panic for me personally never resonated. It was always like, come on, this is just stupid. This is just stupid. But I can say that in all of my experiences with meeting witches, from Wiccans, from, Peo-Negan, I really can't talk tonight for some reason.
Right.
Neo-pagans, all of those tend to be far nicer in my experience, caring about more things than I ever got in the evangelical life after. He made a comment that there's a reason why pastors go into marketing after they leave the service.
Right. Correct.
And that really hit me. It was like, okay, and now you're talking about the, going to all of these conventions and everything. I can see that it's a marketing scam. It is totally a marketing scam to push agendas, and these people are being opportunists by pushing fear and scaring the bejesus out of people.
Right.
And it's exciting. It's
right.
exciting. It's sexy.
You're living a horror flick.
It brings exactly. It brings the adrenaline.
Heroes. Yes, it brings the adrenaline. That's a great. And they present themselves. They truly see themselves as heroic actors, saving children.
Yes.
And in
correct.
In the Satanic Panic, we didn't have hashtags then, but the slogan was "Believe the children," right? And today, they didn't go very far for this. Today's is "Save the children." Is hashtag Save the children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they even lack creativity.
Right.
and stop and think about something. When these things begin to develop, I do have a theory that, and you can say like, well, anecdotally, look what happened here, and it was horrible, and it's proven that it did happen. So we can also find people avoiding the clerical collars. Same thing. Here's an example. They did horrible things. They killed people. They raped people. They did this, that, and the other. But I believe that when something is not true and you begin to obsess into it, that's where you gather the evil. You gather the darkness and the evil of the whole thing. And it's not something that's inherently evil in and of itself. It's the evil that's attributed to it. And also, when something can't be proven, it gets to the point it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. And this is why in the 21st century, we've had this epistemological crisis I keep referring to, that you can bring out example after example that this is false, it's not true, but they will continue to believe it. Case in point, the young man that went with a loaded automatic rifle to the pizzeria, thinking that he was actually going to find this chamber. Not only was there not a chamber, there was no basement.
Mm-hmm.
He opens up a door. I think it was a closet for a bucket and a slop sink. That was basically it. He went on record at his trial. He's in prison now, all right? And he admitted that he was wrong. He had it wrong about the pizzeria, but he believes that the group still exists. See, it doesn't matter.
So he was wrong. The information wasn't.
Correct. Right.
I would guess that he actually has been affirmed in his beliefs, because what that means is that they are so clever. They knew he was coming and they were able to cover it up.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Because the number of seminars where they said the fact that there is no evidence proves just how
Organized they are.
organized
Yes, yes.
and devious this
See,
whole
see, there's no
empire.
way out of it.
Yes.
There's no logic. There's no, I mean, it's
Right.
like saying that, and I really try not to get political in this, but it is very political conversation because of what's going on right now, especially with QAnon. But supposedly Hillary Clinton is the most powerful woman in the world, and
Right.
she's behind this cabal and all of this
Mhm.
stuff, but yet she couldn't win the presidency.
Mhm.
So
Right.
when you break down these conspiracy theories and these things of fear, it does ravel. And I think that's why they need the constant input and that constant, no, it's just, you just haven't found it yet. Your mistake, not theirs. They're still killing and sacrificing children and sex trafficking them. Set Epstein aside for some reason. But there's this thing going on, and a lack of, I mean, to prove a negative has literally become an argument at this point.
Yeah.
It's,
Well,
it,
prove
it's
it doesn't exist. You can't
it, it,
prove
it
that.
is the it is the constant carrot in front of the horse. You'll never reach. You'll never reach it, and that
And
is the
blinders.
nature of a conspiracy. That is the
Yeah.
very nature of a conspiracy. It doesn't have to be proven. You just have to scare people into it.
Well, I mean, there really is no more motivation than fear. I mean, it
And
really,
fear.
it may not last long. It may be completely destructive, but it works. It's worked for thousands of years, you know?
Let me add one other thing that I think is interesting as we're coming up on the celebration of Halloween, for instance, and
Yes.
what I've seen develop over the last 30 years or so. First of all, I was brought up in the Southern Baptist Church, which is a very conservative Baptistic denomination, and my mother was very prominent in our family, and she never discouraged me from celebrating Halloween. There was never a discouraging word ever spoken. As a matter of fact, our church actually had Halloween parties, not harvest parties, actual Halloween parties. People dressed up as all sorts of stuff. And she introduced me to films, which is
Evangelical.
Yeah. Can
right.
potentially be a Satanist. And,
Yes.
and a cabal of sex trafficking, child eating.
Right. And if you question this, you could easily be one of them that's trying to deceive people. So, for example, I went to one of these seminars that was hosted by the university here, and I went with my coven, but we were being very nice, and we were not like holding signs saying "Yay, we're witches" or anything. We were just people in the audience, um, but and I don't even remember what I said at this one, but because the stuff he was saying was just insane. Like he had done one of these surveys in town. It was winter, and one of the signs of Satanism was some tracks in a field. There was a circle with lines. And do you remember that game when you were a kid where there'd be a circle and lines like this, and you'd play tag, but you had to run on the lines? That's what
Yeah.
it was.
Wow.
And another one of them was a dinosaur. It was somebody had made a snow dinosaur. But anyway, and
Wow.
if children cover their, let me see if I can get this right. If children cover their right eye, it's a denial of God, right? And then 20 minutes later in the speech, see if children are covering their left eye, that's because that is the eye of Satan, and so somehow that's identifying themselves as a Satanist. And it's like, so if they cover both eyes, they're just that just means they're running into things. I don't know. Um, so it was that kind of level of just utter bullshit,
Ah,
complete. And so anyway, I don't know what I was saying, but somebody was there writing her master's, and um, and I didn't know this at the time. I found out about 15 years later that I am quoted in her master's thesis for this event. Um, saying, and she must have done a little research on me because she had my name, she had that I worked at the domestic violence program.
Oh, wow.
And that I was a Satanist there. I was an example of how Satanists go to these things to disrupt them and try and prevent the truth from getting out. And the fact that I worked with battered women showed how Satanists were placing themselves in positions to be around vulnerable people in order to have access to them.
Wow.
So it was, and that thesis then ended up being referenced in other things where people were going back to it when they were writing about ritual abuse. And so about 15 years later, I found that I am out there on the interwebs as a satanic whatever.
Wow.
So again, very mainstream and very crazy and impacting ordinary folks in lots of ways.
Okay, so how did we're almost at the top of the hour, which I can't even believe. I feel like we've been talking for 3 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
This VIP session is going to be off the hook. How is there a way? I'm not even going to say how. Is there a way to de-indoctrinate these people, to make them see the light? Is there, I mean, because I am not willing to just throw my hands up in the air and say it's a function of society and it's been going on for the last 5,000 years. People will wake up eventually and a new one will come on. I want to fix this. I want to eliminate this shame. Is there a way to?
I'm not sure that dialogue at this point helps, and the reason why, for the last few years, we've had endless dialogue, and it hasn't really changed a certain group of people. As a matter of fact, they're more steeped in it than ever, and
It
they will
is
continue
smaller
to believe a
though.
lie. They will continue to believe a lie, and I believe that empirical evidence will be the only thing that will change their mind. And let me develop that a little bit more. Empirical evidence doesn't mean that we're sitting around and we're working through the reasoning process of it. That means that things that they observe and see, namely that people are dying that they love, who has been promoting these sort of things. And I hate that we're still in the middle of a pandemic, but it's it's like Siamese twins joined at the hips. Uh, this pandemic that we are experiencing, and this ideology that buys into the lie, has run parallel. And very few of these people are changing their minds. But I'm beginning to talk to people who simply got the vaccine, even though they said it works everything against my principles. And I'll ask them to develop that. What do you mean your principles? It makes no sense at all. None. But
Yeah.
it's because their loved ones are dying as a result of that, and it hits home. I don't know how far it has to go, but I'm not sure that we can at this point. I mean, we can continue to have these sort of things, and hopefully that somebody will listen, or there'll be another second generation conversation that someone's watching the program will go talk to a friend, say, you know what, here's an article that was in the New York Times, or what have you, and
My
read this.
cue.
Yes, good. That was a
Everybody,
hint.
check out this New York Times article that is posted up there. There's also one in Vox that I will be sharing in the Facebook group that
Yeah,
Tim sent me earlier this week.
and I also I don't want to somewhat give a plug for a certain movie, but maybe in the private session I will. But I think that movie should be watched. I think it's a great parable of our present
Plug
condition right now.
it. Go ahead and
Oh,
say
okay.
it.
All right. I just finished the series called Midnight Mass, and it's not anti-Catholic. I want to say that up front, but it's through the writer and producer was Roman Catholic, and so it's going through that type of lens. But it works best with that. Uh, I would encourage you to binge watch it and listen to the very end. It's one of the best parables that I see that's been brought to the movie genre that describes the 21st century condition of the American church. I think
And,
it's got it down.
and that's on Netflix, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it just came out, and I saw the first episode, and I went, "Wow!" And when I finished, I went, "My God, this is great! It's got it nailed."
Awesome. Well,
I
I
don't
know we're
think
going
it'll
to
go
have a lot
away.
to talk about. Go ahead, Kirsten.
I don't think it will go away.
No,
I
I
think
don't
that
either.
it will just transform.
It'll always be with us.
Because, as I said, moral panics, revitalization movements, this belief that there is a previous time when our society was more pure, when
Right.
things were good, and we just got to get back to it. We got to make America great again. That is a part of maintaining status quo and cultural norms. That is part of what humans do in culture. So it will change. Absolutely. It won't be QAnon in the future, but it will be something else.
Let me just say that I think it's deeply reflective of what happened in the late 17th century in this country with the development of the Atlantic slave trade in regards to the growing of the black population, and to scare people into we've got to do something for fear that there might be a revolt of the growing black slave population. And so what was created was the middle white lower class white person, and then the fear created. In other words, be careful. These people will overtake you, so you have to be on our side. And that's why, again, that the middle and lower class folks to this day will listen to the white establishment, who ruins them coming and going. They're mere pawns. And so fear is a great motivator for social construct.
Matt Gaetz and Tucker Carlson just railed this week about a replacement theory, saying that they're going to replace us if we don't do this. So it's all part of that too. Be
Mhm.
careful, these minorities. We might get treated the way we treated them all these years.
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to. And that's just more fear.
More fear.
Yeah. There always has to be a boogeyman. And in fact, right before the show, I had a comment on my Facebook about China and North Korea and about how we will never be able to truly be free and to have a middle class again because of China and North Korea. And my response was, you're looking at a boogeyman again.
Yep.
Whenever there's something, again, it's no self accountability. There's no, if you can blame someone else for everything, then you don't have to love, you don't have to forgive, you don't have to do anything that
Right.
requires you to work the verb of love. You can just blame someone else for all the demise and all of the problems in the world and be done with it.
And maintain the false narrative.
Yeah, and maintain the power and all of that. Enact laws, as Kirsten said. Reach the schools. Now education is bad. All of that. It just keeps going.
Right.
I have to say that the most shocking thing about this show tonight for me was that it's not just in the church.
Oh,
That scares
Correct.
me. That really scares me because I can compartmentalize it and go, okay, that's them. We're over here, and they're really not affecting us. QAnon's really not affecting us, but they are, because we have the save the vote, steal, save the steal, and all of those types of things. It is permeating completely through our
the
government.
Yes. Yes.
Mississippi, is it Mississippi or Missouri legislature codified ritual abuse as that if that was part of an assault case, then it enhanced the penalties. So they actually made ritual abuse against the law. I think it was Mississippi.
But yet, in both of those states, you can marry a 14-year-old.
Right. Yes. So.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour. Again, we said this in the backstage before we started the show. We knew it wasn't going to be enough. So we will perhaps continue this, and we will definitely continue it at the VIP. So hop over to the VIP if you can't. David, I see you. I sent you the link. We'll go ahead and record it so you guys can watch it later. But Tim, any last words and where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. That's basically it. And let me just say, it is way beyond the pale of the church because it found itself in the highest and most powerful office, political office in the world. Think about that.
Okay, I got to ask how. What do you mean?
Well, um, our former president supported QAnon,
Oh,
and that's my point.
okay.
It gave it credence, the highest and most
Wow.
powerful office in the world, not just the United States, but the world. That
That's
shows you how
terrifying.
far it is terrifying. Yes.
Kirsten.
You can find me on Facebook too. And I have no last words because I have 20,000 last. No, let's say 50,000 because that's supposedly how many people are murdered by Satanists every year.
Right.
I have 50,000 last words, so I'll just say none.
Wow. Okay.
Which is double the amount of all murders put together. Without a single drop of blood evidence.
Wow. Well, and I'll just say that the Bible accuses all of the other religions and pagans for child sacrifice, but there has never been 1 ounce of support of it outside of the Bible. So the only support in the Bible is of killing children like Isaac and Moses and Jesus, but child sacrifice was not seen in the Middle East during those times, except by the Judeo-Christians. So thank you both. I can't wait to talk to you in the VIP. You guys are wonderful. This conversation needs to go on. I'll see you guys backstage. Thank you so much.
All right.
Wow, guys. I'm kind of blown away. I still am not good with my words, but I cannot even believe how much this has permeated our society as well as the world. And that's kind of terrifying. So we will definitely continue this conversation in the VIP, and hopefully you'll join us. If not, catch us next week at the same time, and I will definitely see you guys soon. If you have any questions or any follow-up or anything like that that needs to occur, then just message us, jump over into the Facebook group, or email me. Thanks again for all of the support, and walk in love, you guys. Have a great week. Bye-bye.